So let me do that. We're so happy you're here.
Oh, it's great to be there. Hi, everyone.
Hi. So I was just telling them that you are in Wales and that's why you had decided to set these stories there. And we were talking about the Welsh language and the names and trying to kind of get familiar with all of that.
Yes. So, do you know what? I'd love to hear whether or not any of you think you can pronounce things, whether maybe you're happy to have a go. Really? Okay. Well, what about the name of the main character though? Surely you could have a go at that.
I know I asked you that last time when I interviewed you for the first one, but I still don't think I pronounce it correctly.
So she
Google.
is she's called Fionn. So in Welsh, double F is a f, because if there's just one F on its own, then it's a v sound. So yeah, she's called Fionn Morgan, or if you were being very Welsh, it would be Fionn Morgan. But just Fionn is good. Where else? What else do we have? We've got the name of the town they live in, which is Cwm Coed. I'm trying to think what other words there are.
Well, there's
Diolch.
the mountain. What's the mountain called?
Oh, the mountain is Pen y Ddraig. Pen y Ddraig, which is head of the dragon.
Well, we were talking about how much we enjoyed the book. And so we'd love to just hear a little bit about getting started with the series itself. And then this one in particular, like reality TV. To me, I mean, I was going to read it anyway because you read it, but I was so excited about the reality TV component because I am actually not a huge reality TV watcher, but I find all of these books, people are starting to set them more and more in different types of reality TV shows. And I find it fascinating. Cooking, this type of show, survival, whatever. It's really interesting.
I Yeah, well, I okay, let me talk a bit about the series sort of in general then. So I've lived so I'm English, I'm not Welsh, but we moved to Wales about 7 years ago, 8 years ago, and it's a very, very Welsh speaking area. It's very much like moving to a different country. And so my kids go to a school where Welsh is all they speak. They're educated in Welsh. And in fact, the only subject they do in English is English, which they do as a second language. So it's all like mind blowing. And I suppose I didn't want to immediately start writing about the area because I think when you move somewhere, you need to become part of the community. Anyway, we've been here for a few years, and one of the things that I do here is so I am very involved in the community. I'm a town councillor, and one of the things I do is organise the New Year's Day swim in the lake in the town where we live. And on this particular New Year's Day, it was January 1st, 2020, and it was beautiful. It was really beautiful. The water was sort of flat, and the mountain was reflected in the water. It was really gorgeous, and everyone was saying, oh, it's so beautiful. And I was thinking, what if a body floated through the water now? Because like I'm a crime writer, that's what we do. If you and I went for a walk together, you would be thinking how lovely the leaves were, and I would be thinking how long would it take for a body to decompose if I buried it here. So I went home and I was thinking about this lake and this body, and like, where's it come from? What's come from the other side of the lake? Who is it? And then soon after, so in February, March 2020, we went into lockdown, and borders became really important. And in some countries, borders have always been important, but the border between England and Wales actually has never really been important. Like, you wouldn't see it. It's not a hard border. People drive across it all the time. It's I don't know what your geography's like, but if you sort of looked at a map of the UK, Wales goes all the way down the left-hand side of the UK. So it's quite a long border, and people live sort of on it or either side of it. Anyway, suddenly we had effectively a hard border because we have different health authorities, and so we had different laws. People were allowed, they were had isolating rules in one country and not the other. And it caused a lot of tension, and there's already a little bit of tension between the two countries anyway. So I decided that was what I wanted to create, was this fictional world where it was really all centered around a border. And immediately I knew the detective that I wanted to investigate this body. And it's funny because normally I sort of create my characters. They often come after my plot. So I generally, with a book like I Let You Go or Hostage, the plot is the thing that I've thought of first, and then I'm thinking, okay, who do I want to put in that situation? But with this series, with what was then The Last Party, and I didn't know it was going to be series, it was just a book I was writing, Fionn walked onto the page, and she just wouldn't be ignored. She was really kind of feisty and opinionated, really, really sort of annoying, difficult to work with. Like I could see her instantly. I knew what she looked like. I knew how she spoke. I knew how she behaved. I was a police officer myself for about 12 years, and I was quite opinionated and quite difficult. Nowhere near as difficult as Fionn is, but definitely quite kind of a bit bolshy. And I really loved writing her. And so that sort of became The Last Party. And I remember emailing my editor about, I was maybe about a third of the way through the book. And I said, look, I know I write standalone thrillers, but I think I might be writing the start of a series. And she said, I think I'll be the judge of that. And so we waited until I'd finished the book. Like, fair enough. She knows what she's doing. I sent her in the first draft of The Last Party, and she said, yes, Fionn is, Fionn's got more to say, more to do. This town, this community has more to offer. This is a world that people are going to want to come back to. And that's what you want in a series, isn't it? Because mostly when I think about series books that I've loved, occasionally it might be like a clever twist or a really intricate mystery. But actually what I remember about a series is the world and the lead character, right? It's, the detective pairing or whatever the strong character is, and it's the community that they're in. So that's what I had, and it meant that I was really excited about coming back to them for the next book. And bearing in mind we were still in it's sort of in and out of lockdown when I was planning what would become A Game of Lies. And one of the things that happened during this time was that a reality TV show called I'm a Celebrity, Get Me Out of Here, which used to take place in the Australian outback, couldn't take place in Australia, and they moved it really randomly to North Wales, to a castle about, I don't know, 25, 30 miles from me. And so suddenly we had, tiny communities, rural Wales. We had this enormous multi-million-pound franchise descending on us with all these celebrities and all these cameras. And it was such a weird thing to watch on television, something that is a very, very ordinary community. And I thought, I'd love to put Fionn in that situation. I'd love her to investigate something. And I wonder if, it would be possible to create a kind of an impossible murder, something a bit Agatha Christie-like that is a real puzzle. That's what I wanted her to have to sort out. But I also wanted to explore what I love about reality TV, which is how awful it is. But it is so incredibly manipulative. It's manipulative in relation to the contestants, the people on it, but it's also really manipulative in terms of us. And I don't think that's something that we necessarily think about, that it is practically scripted. The people on these shows are cast, here's the old frumpy one, here is the hot guy, here's the kind of the girl that's going to bitch about everyone, that everyone's got their role. And of course it's also edited, each of these characters, and they are characters, is giving the producer 24 hours of material, and they're going to end up with about 10 minutes airtime. And so it's easy for the producer to edit it in a way that makes us, the viewers, feel a certain way, you know, whether we've got to vote or whether we're just taking to social media to give our opinions on something. So the whole thing is so manipulated, and I thought it would be interesting to look at that and to look at to sort of look at the reality versus perception. So that was the starting point for A Game of Lies. That was a big answer to a short question.
No, that's great. That's perfect. And it's interesting that you had a show filmed so close to you. Did you have fun creating your own reality show and kind of taking it farther than it could really go on television right now?
I loved it. And in fact, I had to take out quite a lot because I got like really into it, and I was kind of, you know, doing all the mechanics of the show and the challenges. And I had to remember that actually I was here to write a mystery and not create a reality TV show. So yeah, I really loved it. My editor at the beginning, I remember having a meeting with her, and she said, you know, I'm a bit worried, like this show is really dark, you know, is it too dark, with like it wouldn't really happen? And I did a bit of research on the worst ever reality TV shows, and oh my word, they are horrific. Okay, so a couple of my favorites. They're actually all American, so I'm not gonna, you know, I'm not passing judgment, I'm just saying this is all on you. So one of them is called Who's the Daddy? And it took an adult female who didn't know her biological father, and it put her in a room with 12 men, one of whom was her biological dad. And they did a series of activities, and she had to work out which one was her dad. I mean, what awful. It's an awful thing to do. And then another one, actually, this one I think was British. I can't remember what it was called, but they were putting people, they selected ordinary people to go to the moon. So they said that they would train them as, or to go into space, they were going to train them as astronauts. So they put them through this fake training, and then they put them in like a simulator, basically. And so they essentially, they just made it absolute fools of these people, because they thought they were in space, they thought they'd been trained to be astronauts, and like all the time they were sort of, you know, circling above, I don't know, Watford or like some really real in a simulator. And then the other one that is particularly cruel, I can't remember which country this is, I think it was America. It was like one of those talent shows, except that the objective was to choose the worst person to win the show, but they didn't tell the people auditioning. And so people would get through like to the next round and the next round, and they'd be thinking, oh my God, the best, you know, I'm the most talented, I'm the best singer, I'm the best singer. And then they would win the show thinking that they are the best singer, and then it was announced in front of a live audience that we picked you because you were the worst singer of everyone. I mean, it's so cruel. So I had this conversation with my editor, and then she was like, yeah, okay, no, actually, to be fair, exposure is quite tame compared to that. So then I had a lot of fun working out exactly what the show was. But initially, in the first draft of A Game of Lies, it was just a survival show. And I wrote the first draft, and it just wasn't enough. It wasn't cruel enough. It didn't have the sort of the twistiness that I like in my books. And then I'd kind of thought, well, actually, what would it be like if you thought you were applying for one show and then you discovered that it was something different? And as soon as I had that, that's when the book really took off.
Well, and I do think that's so interesting. All those shows sound terrible. I haven't heard of any of them, but I do think it seems like that the envelope just keeps getting pushed. And so my thought was kind of before we know it, we'll be something with something like your show or one of these others, but it's just kind of sometimes a little horrifying. And I think you're so right in terms of how scripted it all is. And I always have to tell my kids that. I mean, they're old enough now, but when they were younger and they'd be like, "Oh, this is all happening." I was like, "It's not." Like it's so much more set than it looks like. And it's kind of hard to understand that initially.
Yeah, it is. And it is so damaging, I think, for young people in particular. So my daughter is 16 and really loves Love Island, which is all about couples getting together basically, and talking behind their backs, and they're all beautiful, these girls, in a very, very Instagram way. They've all got enormous boobs and tiny waists, so they're all horribly artificial with hair extensions and eyelashes, and it's so fake. And yet she aspires to be that, which is an awful thing to aspire to be.
Well, and I think not only everything you just said, but they've got all these people that can spend hours getting them ready for the show. And, they've got so much more behind the scenes help in addition to whatever else they've done for themselves. I have a bunch more questions, but I want to make sure everybody else, if they have questions, get to ask them. So does anybody have a question they want to ask?
I have a quick one. Is Leo going to be in the third book?
Yes, he is actually in the third book, which I'm editing at the moment. I'm not going to spoil anything, but he has probably more airtime in a way, just because the way the job, so there are two separate jobs going on, two separate investigations. But Leo's is more complex, and a lot of Fion's job ends up sort of having inquiries across the border, so that they're much more sort of into England. So there's a bit less of the Welsh community and more of Leo's world. They're also living together. Well, sort of. Are they living together? No, they're splitting their time between the two houses, but they're very much a couple. And I'm a little bit in love with him.
That makes me
I
so
love
happy.
that. Yeah, I was just going to say that's made my day. I'm so happy.
Yeah, he's a good guy. And the other thing that's just come in actually with I say that like I didn't have any control over it, but in the second draft of this book, I realized I needed another viewpoint. I needed to be able to tell a bit of the story that Leo and Fionn couldn't see, and the ideal person to tell it was Leo's ex-wife Ali. And so we've not really heard very much about her. We've just seen her sort of from his point of view. But suddenly she is telling some of the story, and my God, she's such a nightmare. She's such an awful, awful person, but fundamentally like really insecure. And so we get to see a little bit more about that. But she's one of those people who is sort of entirely fake and wants to be seen as really kind of, I don't know, posh. Or so she does things like find dupes of designer things. So if she sees that her rich neighbors have got a particular thing in their house, she will go and scour and try and find it and like paint it and create it so that her house looks like it's really expensive. So I'm having a lot of fun with her.
Well, that actually takes care of one of my questions. Well, two of my questions, because I was dying to know if Leo and Fionn were going to still be together, but also if there was going to be a book 3. So that's great news.
Yeah, I'm enjoying it actually. I don't know how many, but like I'm not really putting a limit on it. The only thing I do know is that the next book I'm writing, so 2026's book, is a standalone thriller with a huge twist, more than one huge twist. A standalone thriller that I think, have any of you read I Let You Go?
I need to
So
still talking about, everybody was talking about how much they loved it before you hopped on. And I'm like, everybody keeps telling me that. So that I'm going to order it as soon as we're off and get it read.
Amazing. So I Let You Go was my my debut and my New York Times bestseller, the only one I've had. and it's got an amazing twist. And I'm saying that sort of as that's what the reviews say, because I'm British and we can't say our own work is amazing, but that's what the reviews say. But this book that I'm writing for 2026 has a bigger twist and a more audacious twist than I Let You Go. So I'm very excited.
Oh, that's so exciting. And with respect to book 3, I know, and that was going to be another question I had for you. Book 2 came out in the UK last July, and book 2 is coming out here in April. I actually got it from the UK because I was so excited to read it like as soon as it was out. Will they be that far apart again in, when book 3 comes out, or do you not really know yet?
Hope not. I really hope not. I don't know. The US publishing is a bit of a mystery to me, to be honest. Except that like it's a massive country, isn't it? And so reaching all the booksellers and marketing, I guess, takes longer. So I don't know, but it's something I'll find out from my publishers. I hope not, because I do like it when they can come out quite close together, and readers, especially because I run an online book club. And I would say maybe a third of we've got about 10,000 members, and about a third of them are from the States. And so then it's really difficult because we can't all talk about it. We've got to be careful about spoilers.
That makes sense. It looked like, Susan, did you have a question?
Yeah, it was actually more of a comment than a question when you were talking about Allie, because I hated her, but you wrote her so well, and I thought she was such a good example of you could sum these people up in one sentence. And one that stood out to me was when she was mad at Leo because she had to quit her job when really she put their son in daycare 5 days a week so she could go to the gym. Like, it's just the way that you were able to sum up that character. And every time you would come back to her, it was the same, you could just one sentence and you really like, she had so much hatred for her.
Yeah.
And same with, I think also in that first book, in The Last Party, there was another character where you'd said something about the throw was supposed to be on the side of the couch, but he insisted on sitting on it and getting it wrinkled. Like, just the way you could really sum up these characters in one sentence, what I thought was excellent.
Thank you. It's one of my favorite things about writing is being able to present characters in a way that makes them feel real, either in a way that you warm to them, or you would hate to know them in real life. I like most writers, I spend a lot of time just people watching and collecting characteristics from people. And the other thing I really love to do, and you will know this if you've read just one of my books, is to see characters from different people's perspectives, and to show how different people are. How, I mean, even just with Fionn in Leo, that I think if we only saw Fionn through someone else's eyes, I really don't think we'd warm to her at all. I think if she was a secondary character, and we just heard the story from Leo, she'd be just a complete nightmare. But because we are inside her head, and because we know about her backstory, and we can see that she's just kind of hot-tempered and a bit of a nightmare, but fundamentally a really caring, warm, lovely woman, then she becomes someone we want to spend time with. And equally, those small characters that like Ali. So I'm sort of enjoying this in book 3, because nobody is completely awful. When I was a police officer, I interviewed so many criminals, and obviously spoke to lots of victims of crime, and just nobody is all bad, nobody is all good. I spoke to some awful criminals who I remember speaking to one guy who was a really, really bad man. Loved his mum. I mean, really, really loved his mum. Was worried about how long he was going to be in interview, because he'd promised his mum he'd go around and walk her dog because she'd had a hip replacement. And so it's those sorts of nuances that I think make characters feel real when you write them in books, because that it makes you a bit conflicted. We're not creating sort of pantomime villains who are like twirly moustaches and wearing big black cloaks. Like, we're creating everyday baddies and everyday heroes, and that means that those heroes are going to have flaws, and those baddies are going to have redeeming features.
What about you having been a police officer and now writing crime fiction? Do you feel like, do you have to still go back and talk to some of the people you used to work with? Do you still have to do a fair amount of research, or do you feel like you have all of that down and you understand the way it works and can just start writing?
So do you know what? I've been through a sort of slightly weird journey with that. So I started off not needing to speak to anyone because I'd only just left the police and I kind of knew it all. There was the occasional specialist department that I'd go and speak to. But basically I kind of knew it, and everything was really accurate. And then in my kind of middle books, I had been out of the police for a few years. So I did go back and check lots of former colleagues and tried to get it right, but maybe took a little bit of artistic license if I needed to. And now I just make it all up. I had a conversation. I'll tell you a funny story that she won't mind me telling it because she's a good sport. So Lisa Jewell, big fan of Lisa's books, love her writing, love her as a person. And she sent me a copy of one of her books quite a long time before it was published. There was a mistake in it, a policing error, something quite sort of small, but very, very wrong. And it wouldn't have collapsed the story, but it was just a kind of a wrong thing. And so I emailed her and I said, oh my God, I love the book. Are you interested? Like, there's this tiny police thing that isn't quite right. Do you want me to tell you like how to fix it? And she went, no, that's fine. I'm not really bothered. And so then we started talking about it. And she's like, I write to entertain, and it's not my job to be accurate. I write in a way that sort of makes my readers feel that they can trust me. And so that's all that matters. And it really, it just really hit home. Like, it sounded really freeing to just let the story do what it needed to do. I don't think I could completely, she does no research at all. If she needs to know something, if there's a fact she's putting in a book, she will just write it, just make it up. I don't think I could do that. I do need to like check stuff, but I'm much more relaxed now. And so there are things that, just wouldn't really work. I tend to work on the basis of, could it happen? Not would it happen? Not does it happen routinely? Is that how it's done in the police? But could it happen? And if it could, then I'll run with that. So a good example of that is like the speed with which we might get forensic results. Do I want us to wait for 6 weeks to get a DNA result? What are we all going to do because what we do in reality in the police is we go, okay, so that job's on hold while I wait for results, and I'll carry on with my other job. But readers don't want to follow a police officer doing 17 different jobs, because that would be really confusing. And so there are lots of ways in which actually you have to depart from reality. Another example of that is that the way a homicide inquiry would work is that you'd be in a team of like maybe 24 people, 30, 40 people, officers, and everyone would be doing lots and lots of small inquiries, and they might be completely unrelated to each other, but they're all feeding into the main incident room. And so no one individual solves a murder. It is genuinely a team effort. But that doesn't work for a reader. We don't want to follow 40 detectives. We don't want to get to know 40,
Right.
We want to root for one or two. And, we'll have a few other sort of people in the background that we're happy to know a bit about. But it cannot be accurate, because if it was accurate, it wouldn't work as a book. So I'm quite relaxed now about authenticity.
I can't even imagine trying to follow 30 characters. So thank you. I'd be like, wait a minute, who's that again? Yeah. So I very much appreciate that. Well, the one thing I wondered a little bit about, and I think it's fascinating, is because one of them is in England and one is in Wales. So you have these kind of border issues. So Is that something you had to really look at all, or you just said, okay, I'm just going to write the way I think it would happen?
Well, no, so I had to make that up as well because I wanted my lake to be on the border. That was sort of the point of it. I wanted, I don't know, have you seen The Bridge? As that show made it to the States? No, okay, so The Bridge is a TV crime drama. I'm gonna get my countries wrong. Sweden and Norway, maybe. Anyway, my geography is awful. 2 Scandinavian countries that are joined by a bridge, and there's a murder that happens, and it's right on the middle, or a body that's been placed on the middle, so it becomes a joint investigation. So I wanted that sort of thing. I wanted this to be a joint investigation between not just 2 forces, but 2 countries. And in order to do that, my lake needed to be on the border, and there is no lake on the border between England and Wales. So then I had to decide, do I stick with the border as it is and use real life geography and just put a fictional lake somewhere? But I felt if I did that, I would get lots of complaints from readers who do know the geography, who said that there isn't a lake there. Because honestly, readers complain about lots of things. I once, slight diversion, but I once had someone write in, I think it was in Let Me Lie, where my characters have a game of Scrabble. The Scrabble is not a major plot point. They are just having a game of Scrabble one evening. Anyway, she wrote to tell me that the word score that I had put down for this character was 2 out because she had recreated it on a Scrabble board and I mean, you know, kudos to her for taking the trouble to do that. So I know that people do these things. So I decided what I would do is I would create a fictional world. And so all the places that I mention in those books are made up Welsh names. And that meant that I could be really flexible with where things were, where the police station was, how long it took to get from A to B. So I found that a bit easier.
That's so interesting that you say that about readers, because I hear authors talking about that kind of stuff regularly. I worked at Murder by the Book here in Houston for a long time, and we had a guy who would come. He was coming with these manila folders with like all these notes, and he would give them to the authors each time, and we had no idea what they were. And finally, we were going to dinner one night with one of the authors, and he brought it with him, and he opened it. The guy would take like 3 pages worth of notes correcting everything that was wrong in the book, and then handing it. So we were like, oh no, because I think everybody thought he was doing something nice. So then from now on they were like, you can't give the authors anything at these events. But I mean, who has the time to do that kind of stuff?
Oh my
Why would you
word,
do
that
it?
is,
But it
I
was
mean,
like on
that is
note paper, and he
extraordinary.
literally page 1, blah blah blah, page 3, blah blah blah. I was like, oh my gosh. So yes, readers do get
I mean,
overzealous.
I'm just thinking about how like exhausting a US tour is and how tearful I sometimes get just because like I don't know what state I'm in and what time zone it is. The idea of being presented with like a list of all my mistakes might just tip me over the edge. So I'm coming to Houston. I'm coming to Murder by the Book.
Oh, you are?
I am so excited. I am
When?
so excited. I'm going to tell you. I'm going to look now at
Okay, I'm
my
going to come because I definitely would love to meet you in person.
oh my word, it would be amazing.
Carmen, we need to go.
Okay, hang on. When am I coming? I'm coming at the end of April. I
Oh
think
no.
it's the 6th. Oh, don't be away. Don't be
Tell me.
away for me. Right, I'll tell you the exact date. It is the 19th of April.
I That's great. I was worried end of April, my son has a baseball tournament in Fort Worth. And so I was like, oh, please don't be right
I
at the end
mean,
of
Cindy, you
April.
know, let's just say what's more important, you know, me or your son, but it's
Well,
good that you can come. So yeah, the 19th of April, I'm going to be at Murder by the Book with Megan Miranda and Kristen Bird.
oh,
So
I
that's
love
quite a
Kristen
cool event,
Bird.
isn't it?
Kristen lives here, so I know Kristen, and I've only met Miranda and talked to her online. So okay, good. Well, Carmen and I will make sure we're both there.
So this is going to be really, really fun. And then I have to be in LA for 7 o'clock the next morning. That's
Oh,
going to be fun. It'll be fine. It'll be fine. So that's really exciting. And although I'll only be in Houston for like about 12 hours, you'll have to nearer the time tell me where to go to eat, or you know, so just something. I like to at least know that I've seen something in each place, even if it's a park or whatever.
That sounds great. Well, I'm so happy to hear that.
But I don't want the man with the manila
Yeah,
folder.
hopefully that was pre-COVID. I haven't worked there since before COVID, and I think they shut that down after we had that dinner. But yeah, I was like, oh, don't tell that story because they'll be mad at me. Be like,
No,
Cindy,
no, no, no,
don't
I
tell me.
won't.
So
Don't worry.
please don't tell that story. But that's pretty funny. Well, other questions? I have a couple more, but I don't want to keep everybody from asking their questions if they have them. Carmen?
Claire, I loved the book. It was the first one of yours that I've read, but it's not going to be the last, not by a long shot. The character of Dave the dog, I just loved the dog. Is that based on a pet that you own or have owned, or how did you come up with that character?
Oh, thank you. I love Dave too. He is a sort of a composite of several dogs that I've known in terms of size and behavior. So my very good friend Ruby had a dog called Teggy, who was the sort of the size that I imagined Dave being, this kind of sort of huge and lollopy and very hairy and sort of made up of lots of different breeds. And so he was a bit, I mean, he was gorgeous, but he was a bit peculiar looking. And then we have 3 spaniels who are individually they're quite well behaved, but sort of en masse they're a lot, and there's lots of sort of barking, and then a friend of mine has a dog with attachment issues, who's only happy if he crawls on top of her. And so yeah, Dave was a composite, and initially he didn't have a big part, you know, he was just a dog, that was it. I just thought it'd be fun to give her a dog that made her life a bit hard. And then of course in A Game of Lies he ended up like playing a really, really major part, which I like. And so he's still around in book 3. Slightly challenging because like logistically I need her to be at work, and I keep having to go, oh damn it, where's the sodding dog? Like, you know, who's looking after the dog? So I've sort of learnt my lesson. I'm not sure I'll give my main characters pets anymore. I might give them like a cat or something a bit less labor intensive.
A bird.
Yeah, absolutely. But he is a great dog.
He is a great dog. That's so funny that you say that about her having to keep up with the dog, because every once in a while I'll be reading a book and the person will have a young child, and then you don't hear about the young child forever, and you're like, okay, what happened to their child? So I can see where I appreciate that you're even wondering where the pet is.
Yeah, it's a tough thing actually, the author thing. I was thinking about this today because I was listening to a book by Clare Douglas, who is an author I love. And it's a brilliant book, and she happened to mention in it that one of the characters, his parents had died in a car crash when he was young. That kind of wasn't really anything to do with the plot. It was just a sort of, that's where his parents are. And then another character only had one of her parents, even though she was sort of in her 20s. And it made me realize how often as writers we try and get rid of relatives, because otherwise they get in the way when something bad happens. Because of course what happens is, you know, if you're caught in the middle of a terrible situation, your mum comes, doesn't she? And you know, or your grown-up kids come and help, or your sisters, and you have this support network. And support networks are a pain for authors, partly because we want our vulnerable character to be like vulnerable and in peril. We don't want them to be looked after. But also because it's more characters for us to write and more people to move around and have cups of tea and talking. And it's like, no, stripping it down. And I think pets are a bit like that. They're sort of a bit of a headache for us.
No, that's very valid. Well, yes, and you have to get rid of some relatives, or those people would just come in and swoop in and take care of everything, and you wouldn't have the issues that you have in the stories, you know? So I
Yeah.
hadn't thought about that before. I like that. Well, does anybody else have any other questions on this book? And I want to ask you, Claire, too, kind of what you've been reading lately. But I know we also were given the widget of the book I interviewed you about, the grief book, 18 Assurances. And I didn't know if anybody had any questions about that real quick, because I not everybody read it, but some people, you know, I think everybody's on a different journey with what they're dealing with. But does anybody have, Dee, did you want to ask her? Okay.
Question, but I just wanted to say thank you. It was so honest, authentic, and it's a book that I'm giving to somebody else that really is in that much more than I realized what they were dealing with. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Dee. That's really lovely, and I hope your friend is okay. Can I ask if you have read it and you feel you've got the sort of the time and the space to do so, if you could leave a review on Amazon, because Amazon
Did.
always is the best
I did.
sort of search. Did you? Thank you so
I
much.
did on Goodreads and on Amazon. Because I do think
Oh.
that the person that is looking for this type of book, we need to kind of tell them that it's out there.
Exactly that. And it's
Yeah.
the sort of book that actually, as a reader, you want to hear from other readers. It's irrelevant what the blurb says, it's irrelevant what, you know, another author has said. You want to know from another reader, what is this book about? How's it going to make me feel? Is it the right book for me? And whether it is or isn't is like, I don't care. I want it to reach the people who need it. And so reviews are just so helpful. So thanks for that, Dee. I appreciate that.
Absolutely.
I've had such great feedback on our interview, and which I really appreciated from people, but also I've been telling everyone I know that would need this book about it, and people have been very appreciative. I've explained, I think was much more useful to me, as we talked about, than many books on grief. And I just feel like it, you know, it's one you can pick up and put down. You can understand based on the passages what you're getting. And so I do feel like that it's very useful. And like I said, I've been telling people right and left about it.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Absolutely.
I agree. I'm sorry, I'm going to add a comment as well. I've had a lot of grief in my life, so I have read a lot of like the scientific books of like David Kessler, Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, Alan Wolfelt. I've read all those. And to be honest, I was nervous about your book, but because I've loved all your previous books, I'm like, Claire can do no wrong. I'll just read it. And I absolutely, it resonated with me. So many chapters, three of them, like I felt like you were talking, like we were having a conversation and a cup of tea. That book resonated with me so much. I read it in like 12 hours. I couldn't put it down because I thought it was just going to be a side book, just read a chapter here and there. No, it was amazing. I loved it.
Oh, thank you. I'm really, really glad to hear that. Thank you.
Anybody else on that? I don't want to cut anybody off.
Yeah, I just wanted to say I lost someone very unexpectedly in August, so I wasn't sure how I was going to be, and it was fantastic. And I'm going to give it to people as well because it really, really touched me. And thank you so much for it.
Oh, thank you, Jen. And I'm sorry about what you've been through. It's really tough. But I'm glad that you were able to find something in my book that spoke to you.
Yeah, there was a lot. So thank you.
I agree with that. Well, before we wrap up, on a cheerier note, I would love to hear kind of what you've read recently or what's on your bedside table to read.
Okay, so I have just yesterday I finished Ruth Ware's next book, One Perfect Couple, which is also set around a reality TV show. And that was absolutely brilliant, as all Ruth's books are. And now I'm listening to a Clare Douglas book called The Wrong Sister, which is very good, about two sisters who look quite similar and they kind of swap lives for a week. She and her husband go to stay in her sister's apartment in Venice, and then the sister and her husband stay in the other sister's house looking after their twins. But there's a break-in. The twins are unharmed, but the sister and her husband are killed. And then they she receives a note to say it should have been you. I got the wrong sister. So now she knows that someone's after her. So that's where I'm at with that, and it's very exciting. So yeah, reading a lot of crime.
I haven't read Claire Douglas before. Is there one I should start with?
I don't know. I wonder whether maybe she's not sold in the States. I really like her. She's a really big author here. I'm trying to think which is her best.
Well, I can look. I just didn't know if there was one that you thought, oh, I just absolutely love it. Start with this one.
Oh, The Couple at Number 9 is her biggest hit. Yes, read that one first. No idea if it's available in the States, but The Couple at Number 9, really good.
Okay, great. I feel like I vaguely heard that title, so I'll look. But okay, good. Does anybody else have anything before we wrap up? Okay, Claire, this was wonderful. Thank you so much for taking time to talk with us, and I will see you on April 19th at Murder by the Book.
Oh, I'm so excited. I'm hoping we'll get a good crowd. So if you know anyone in Houston, tell them to head on over to my event. Thank you so much, guys. It was really lovely to speak to you all.
It was great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, everybody.